What's going on, guys? Jesse from Defense Mechanisms here, and in today's video I just want to do a quick AAR or debrief on the recent Kyle Defoor carbine class I took. This is my third time training with Kyle Defoor. I'd recently taken 2 of his pistol classes, and then this was the first time taking the carbine class with him. So right off the bat, the first thing I'll say about like Kyle and guys like Chuck Pressburg, Bill Blowers is they probably do like one of the best jobs of blending what is performance-based or competition shooting with defensive shooting. It seems like you were either in kind of one camp or the other in previous years, whereas nowadays, like I feel like guys like this are starting to bring the benefits of the performance shooting to the defensive side. So class started with Kyle just kind of introducing himself, and right off the bat just kind of looking at your weapon configuration and making some suggestions that he thinks will help benefit the entire class. And some of those suggestions are extending your butt stock fully to the rear, right? The more compact the butt stock is, the more you're really going to have to get into that gun, and it's going to inhibit you being able to shoot as fast as possible or get the best vision or control on the gun. The next thing is he has to remove all accessories bottom of the rail, right? So some guys had like vertical foregrips, like myself, I had an indexer on there, and he just asked that you remove the accessories so you can find what is ideal hand placement for you. So real quick, I'll go over the configuration with the accessories that'll matter on here of what I was using in the class. So off the bat, we've got the Griffin Armament M4 SDK, using their TAC comp underneath as a compensator, 11.5 government profile barrel, Griffin rail, Geisley trigger. I was using the Comp M5 on the Unity Tactical Fast Mount, and then using the Aimpoint 3X magnifier on the Unity Flip to Center mount. Using a DM sling in the furthest on the back and the front of the gun configuration. So right off the bat, as we started the class, it started just how any good training class should start, with a safety and med brief. Again, Kyle gave us local hospitals, and then what the actual med plan was in case we were to have an incident on the range with ourselves, or there was another like event going on next door that day. So if something with them had happened and they wandered over. From there, we went down, brought all of our ammo down to about the 40, and started to get into the predictive shooting phase. And one thing I'll say about predictive shooting, I think it's hard for most people, is it's not outcome based, right? So if you're looking at your target and this is your first time doing predictive shooting, you're gonna be like, man, pulled a couple of those. But all predictive shooting is it's a training aid that we use to enforce what is the fundamentals. And the fundamentals for Kyle are simply control, grip, and vision, right? So what you're doing during predictive shooting is you are getting one flash sight picture and then firing 2 rounds. And what this does is it really shows you what you're doing with the gun and what you're actually seeing with your vision. So a couple of big takeaways for me on the predictive shooting aspect was again, control of the rifle, right? So one thing that I see a lot of people in this industry are tending to have, right, a bad habit due to accessories on top of the gun that we're using, is it's very easy to start to get this elbow to kind of go perpendicular to the deck, right? It's sticking out. And one thing Kyle's a big proponent of is bringing that elbow down and pointing it at the ground. And again, this is just going to give you better control on the gun. It's going to allow you to pull that butt stock into the pocket a little bit better, get that butt stock more center line, and give you the best, control and recoil mitigation on the gun. The next part is leaving my dominant hand a little bit looser, and I think Kyle has a great way of describing that, and it's like holding a beer bottle. I feel like a lot of people, they have this tendency where they want to crush grip with both hands, but what that does is it really slows down your trigger speed, right? And a way that you can kind of test this in yourself is leave your hand a little loose and work that trigger finger and see how fast you can work it. And then make a fist or pinch your thumb and middle finger together and then try to work that trigger. And what you can see is it dramatically slows down. So, having to be actually conscious of leaving that grip a little bit loose, really easy as you start to get to these like sub 2-second build drills, where you really want to tense into the gun. But again, having the discipline to just leave that hand a little bit lax so you can actually work that trigger and avoid trigger freeze. The next part of it for a lot of people was just remaining target focus. I feel like this has become easier the more that people are shooting red dots on handguns. But the minute that you start to actually try to look at that dot or track that dot rather than seeing the dot on the paper or the target, that's what's going to start to cause those misses. So it really just keys into the fundamentals and allows you to start to self-diagnose these things, right? Did I have some trigger freeze there? Did I have good control on the gun? When did I lose control on the gun? Was I staring at my dot? Next part that we went into was zeroing of the guns. So a couple of cool things that, I think Kyle has a really good breakdown on zeroing. At a lot of classes I've been to, it's like zeroing could be a 4 or 5 hour event to get the entire class up and zeroed. And in a class like this where the pace is actually moving, we don't have time for that. So, Kyle at the very start of his lecture guarantees you that within an hour and a half everyone in the class will be zeroed, and then breaks down kind of the maths on it and what you need to do to get properly zeroed. We started at 25, fired 10 rounds to get a good group there, and then took it all the way back to 100. Was able to zero no problem on the Aimpoint Comp M5, and then flipped up the tripler to be able to actually zero that to the dot. So, and then from there you start to go into what is Kyle Defoor's first Hat Qual. So the first Hat Qual for Kyle is standing at 100 yards. You're going to drop to prone, fire 10 rounds on a B8, and then it's got to be under 14 seconds and 90 or better. Was able to first time go that using the tripler. No issues. I think another good thing that he talks about during the zeroing phase is making sure that you actually zero to the appropriate target size for the distance that you're using. So zeroing on a B8 at 100 and then taking it back to 200 and using the actual back of the B8, that whole sheet of paper, to try to keep those rounds on. Also understand the limitations of your gun, right? What is the MOA of your dot? What is the MOA of your gun with the ammo? It's not going to be like a precision rifle where we're stacking cloverleaf here, but again, we should be able to hold them all to the A zone, no problem, or on a B8 target. So yeah, got to run that a couple of times, and that pretty much ended day one there. I think we were about 400, 450, something like that, rounds in for the day. And yeah, just some really good data on fundamentals, vision, and then, getting proper zeros on the gun. The next part that we went into, starting day two, we had a couple of guys that had some weapons malfunctions the day before, so he allowed them to get just a really quick Z on the gun, and then we went into the combatives portion of it. And I'd done the combatives portion with Kyle in his pistol class before, so I was kind of interested to see what the difference with the rifle was, and was pleasantly surprised that we actually started to incorporate the rifle into that combatives. Now, I will say, this isn't like you're going to show up to class and now you're an MMA fighter because you took this combatives portion, or now you're a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. This is definitely here's a couple of quick tools to get somebody off of you. Those being forward and rearward elbows. Obviously, elbows, you have to kind of close the distance. That's a close proximity. So he gives you another tool, a standoff of a framed open palm slap, that will... that's more of a distance, and then he goes into edged weapons, right? He'll give you a template. I think the cool part of his template is it's basically based on human reaction, right? So the first part, you stab them in the throat, and what that looks like for post-penetration. But people's natural instinct is then to grab up at that, which then opens up the rest of the template, right? So having a couple of key places that, you're going to be able to go hilt deep, get good post-penetration, and get yourself out of there. From there, you guys will put the guns on. Obviously, we've made sure we locked everything open, they're flagged, and then you and a partner will start to work. Like, he comes in to grab your gun, you'll work the elbow, getting to the blade, working through the template. And yeah, like I said, I thought it was just really cool to actually be able to incorporate the rifles and see what that actually looked like. From there, we started shooting at 200, so same kind of deal as the day before, starting in a standing position, dropping down to prone, firing at 200. Again, the tripler was great in that regard, allowed me to be able to see, what I needed to see at that distance, put the rounds where I needed them to go. Then we worked back down, we put through ammo at the 50-yard line and started to work the vision piece a little bit more. So the way Kyle breaks down vision is 3 different ways, right? So we have flash of color. Obviously, that's being at a very close distance. I'm target focused. The minute I see a flash of my red dot over the target area that I want to shoot, I'm letting those rounds go. The next, we have bouncing dot, right? So the dot is on the target, but between recoil, what I'm seeing is basically like a 12 o'clock to 0 or a 1 o'clock to 0 coming back in. And, again, we're timing the bouncing of the dot to fire the round as it comes back into that 0. And then the last one is a stop stable dot, right? So that is, obviously dot is on the target and it's stable, and I'm pressing those rounds each time. It has the ability to be stable. So started to work that. The way that we worked the vision piece was bill drills, right? So starting off, it was 6 rounds at 10 yards under 2 seconds. You get to work that a few times, then you move back to the 20-yard line, it's 2.5 seconds, and then 30-yard line is like 3 seconds, and I think we pushed back to 50 on the last one, and that was under 3.5 seconds. So get to run each iteration a couple of times, and then he puts you on the timer for what is the next part of the Hat Qual, right? So running 2 guys at a time, you'll start at the 10-yard line, fire your 6 rounds under 2 seconds, you'll move back to the 30, to the 20, the 30, and then the 50. And basically you had to make time on every single thing, and you were allowed to have 4 outside of the A zone in the C zone. So D zone didn't count, and also anything off the paper obviously didn't count. So I think everyone in the class but 2 guys was able to pass that first time go, so pretty incredible on that. Like, I mean, those are some spicy speeds for sure. So surprised myself even on being able to get those 6 rounds off in under 2 seconds at 10 yards, even a couple of times having trigger freeze, and still was able to make time on that. So next part that we got into was shooting on the move, kind of, right? So it's like getting into the position and shooting. How this works is we'd start at 50, you'd fire 2 rounds into top part of an A zone, run to the 30, 2 rounds in the top part of the A zone, run to the 10, 2 rounds into the top part of the A zone. All rounds had to be into the A zone. Anything out, then it was a failure. And I believe it was a 14-second par time on that. So, first time through, I ran it just with my red dot, kind of got that stop stable dot at 50. As you're running to the 30, the importance here is making sure you're mounting the gun before you actually get into the position, right? If you run all the way up, stop, then bring the gun up, you're just going to be bleeding time. So making sure that gun's coming up as you're getting to that stop position. As soon as you stop your feet, trying to get bouncing dot on that 30, and then flash a color at the 10. Was able to make that first time go as well with the red dot, and then ran it 2 more times, and I used the tripler at 50. So there was able to throw the tripler up, fire my first 2 rounds at 50. As I was running to the 30, I would flip the tripler down, and then just use the dot at 30 and 10. So just was cool to see like the time difference between using the magnifier at 50 and not using the magnifier. And what I'll say is obviously cut some time off by using that magnifier at 50. Next part, we started to work target transitions. So again, this is working body, 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 head, body, and trying to see like what that cadence actually looked like, obviously slowing down to make sure you're getting the headshot, getting quick back on the body, starting to work targets inside, outside, outside to inside, and different things there. Again, I think important pieces there are just making sure you're moving your eyes before the muzzle, right? If you're trying to move the muzzle with your eyes, you're always going to track over the target. So the way to be efficient there is to make sure you're moving your head and eyes first and then bringing the gun to that position, remaining target focus. I also feel like this is really where people start to understand target focus is as we started to get into some of the transitions and shooting on the move. Again, it's much easier. You're not thinking about all the other things. It's just seeing the dot sitting on the target. So from there, he allowed us to work that at basically your own pace. I think the round count for the class was about 800 rounds. I brought about 1,300, and at this point we were cutting real close to 800, maybe 900 rounds, again, depending on how many iterations you wanted to shoot the transitions. And then from there, we started working on shooting on the move. Obviously, he sets up, a moving forward and backwards, but then moving off axis and angle as well. I think the thing I really like about Kyle and the way he teaches shooting on the move is very similar to like a Jared Reston, where the pace is the pace. The reason that we're shooting on the move is because we fucking have to. It's not because we want to, right? So understanding like that we're not doing this Groucho walk, like really compressed or like trying to time our steps as they start to hit. It's just moving at a natural gait and firing when your vision tells you have all the pieces, right? So got to work some really hard off axis transition stuff there, and kind of see what you could do. So again, that was all kind of on yourself. As many times as you wanted to run it back and forth was no problem. So first issue that we seen, adjustable gas block, right? They were just finicky. Like a couple of guys had them and either their guns were overgassed, undergassed, like they just weren't performing reliably. It was causing a lot of malfunctions, which was obviously then eating into what was their times on a lot of these drills. Next part was cheap ammo, right? So make sure your training ammo is good, reliable. We had one guy that had a squib round, and luckily it was during one of the build drills. He just noticed the low recoil impulse there, cleared his gun, looked down the barrel, and sure enough, there was a bullet sitting in there. So downed that gun for the day, but luckily he had a backup and was able to get back into the class. The last one, again, we've talked on this before, is the hatred for ambi safeties, right? So the reason we don't like ambi safeties is it allows, especially in some of our carry positions, right, that front sling, rear sling, much easier to manipulate the safety on a piece of gear, something like that, something to get into the trigger well and discharge that rifle. The reason that I would say for this class was it was actually changing people's dominant hand grip, right? So to be able to deactivate that safety, was digging into the opposite side of their dominant hand, and they were having to slightly adjust their grip out to then come back into it. And what that was doing is just bleeding time off the clock, right? A lot of these guys weren't able to actually meet the par times, especially those sub 2-second build drills at 10 yards, just because either they didn't have a good enough connection because their grip was compromised from the beginning, or they would have to take too much time by adjusting their hand to actually be able to get on the gun properly. So, again, Kyle's recommendation, our recommendation is, just use the single-sided safety. One thing that I've seen with the Unity mount for myself is there's no free lunch, right? So the benefit of having these tall mounts is obviously passive aiming under nods, using a gas mask during CBurn operations, stuff like that. The downside is connection on the gun, right? So as we talk about connection, one of your connection pieces is this good cheek weld on the gun, right? And what the high mount prevents is me from burying my face down, right? If I bury that good cheek weld, now I'm below the dot. So what you can see is you actually have like a chin weld. And that just compromises, again, connection when you're trying to run the gun as fast as possible. and have the best vision on it, there's some compromise there. It becomes as exacerbated as you go to the prone position, right? So now you got this chin weld right there, and you're in more of a heads-up display, and you can't really just bury down on the gun quite as well. Was able to fight through all that, obviously, but just something worth noting. That's kind of the first downside that I've really seen in these taller mounts. Next part was just the magnifier. I talked about some of the controls with it and zeroing it, but the other downside of the tripler is just eye box, right? Unlike a variable power scope or something like that, like you don't have as forgiving of eye relief. So for these, you've really got to get yourself up into it. And obviously being that close, you know, with this chin weld, there was a couple of times where like I was hitting the back of my hat or like my eye pro on this eyepiece. But again, it was a non-issue for me. I was able to work through all that and, you know, get the hits that I needed to get. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much for it for the 2-day class. Obviously, can't recommend taking the Defoor class enough. Like a super good dude, super good shooter. And, you know, again, we'll really push what you're able to do with the carbine, so, or a pistol, obviously, if you make it to his pistol class. Understand that they're sold out pretty quickly, so, you know, as he drops that schedule in the beginning of the year, trying to jump in one, the benefit is once you're in the alumni group, then those classes come out early to you guys, so you can get kind of first access to that. But again, highly recommend. Was a great time. If you guys got any questions or anything like that, feel free to hit us up at contact@defensemechanisms.com, and we'll catch you in the next video.